to become more social. Now obviously you know, because Facebook as an example is a version of being social, but can we transfer this to a higher level? And I think we can. And I'll give you examples. By the way, we gave you a list of typical type of dilemmas in the social media. And we have thought a bit about how can we integrate those. Also in best practices, you very often see that organizations have integrated those opposites rather than replace one with the other. Our education doesn't help us very much in dealing with dilemmas. And I'm now giving a compliment to MBAs because I use them in the same sentence as education. MBAs are, as you know, walking spreadsheets, and they are bipolar thinkers. You're educated to be bipolar. Now what is that? Let me give you an example. I very often teach MBAs, in the Netherlands better known as mediocre but arrogant, and I ask them the famous question, why would an organization centralize and why would an organization decentralize? Now how do you recognize an MBA? The answer is there before the end of your question. Okay? And they say standardization, economies of scale, consistency, that's why you centralize. And you decentralize close to the customer, flexibility, etc. And then I go into the second round and I ask the same question, but I say, first think. And most of them get nervous because normally that's not part of their education. Right? Now, if you think about the question, and I'm involving you, what is the only reason for a company to centralize and the only reason for a company to decentralize? Any idea? And don't guess, because if you know the answer, you say, yeah, sure.
Making money.
Making money, that's adding to the list. By the way, it's fine. So it's called the young generation. Yeah. A new CEO, yeah. Or work for McKinsey, yeah. No, the point I'm trying to make, by the way, it's all okay what you're saying. But the point I'm trying to make is that the only reason for centralization is decentralization. Okay? Because if you're not decentralized, there's nothing to centralize. Right? And people say, yeah, I never thought about it this way. Now, let's take our human body. Is that centralized or decentralized? And we all know the answer is yes. We have centralized certain functions to allow for more decentralization. Okay? Now, if I do cultural research or corporate culture, there are degrees of centralization and degrees of decentralization, and one is at the cost of the other. Why? Our human body gives you, because if we are completely centralized, we die. It's information overflow, we can't function. If we decentralize everything, we die. So life is how you integrate centralization and decentralization. Another example, Myers-Briggs. Have you ever used Myers-Briggs, that crap? Yeah? And as my colleague says, oh, Myers and Briggs, aren't they two housewives that developed a questionnaire over the weekend? Now, let me tell you a story. I was with 3 senior British consultants, which is the English way of saying old. They used Myers-Briggs, personality test, for about 25 years. And they accumulated a database, and Mrs. Trompenaars, you have a database on culture, can we merge them? I said, why not? Have you filled it in yourself? I said, no. So why don't you do that? So I went to the internet, $2, you get a profile. And it was deductible, so I did it. Right? And you know those questionnaires where you have to choose between A and B, A and B, A and B? And with every choice you're in doubt, right? That crap. And you get a profile. And what I found is that if you score 80 on thinking, you score 20 on feeling. If you score 70 on introvert, you score 30 on extrovert. Why? So I asked these 3 guys, 25 years of using MBTI, can you explain me, why if I'm thinking, is that done at the cost of my feeling? That's why I call this crap. Now, I obviously know there are people who only feel. We call them either French or neurotics. Yeah? And I know people who only think. We call them robots or Swedes, right? I know people who don't do either of them, and they were re-elected as President of America, right? Now, think about your hero in life. Your hero in life, whoever that is, your partner, an old professor, a political icon. Is that a thinker or a feeler, your hero? Can I guess? They score 100 on thinking, 100 on feeling, and they combine the two. And that's exactly the reason why it's your hero. So why are there no questionnaires that measure that? Okay? Now that is leading to In fact, the last, by the way, the slides will be available in many devices. What I will do is show you what this has ended to. I mean, with the last 10 years we had, I think, 3 crises, and the next is coming. This has resulted, this bipolar thinking, in organizations that look a bit like this, okay? And I would like to see what is the alternative, yeah? Now, the alternative is integrative work. First of all, innovation. Have you ever used the word we as leaders or we as whatever, we need to add value? You know who developed that concept of adding value? Michael Porter. You have the value chain and you add value. And I once was in a forum with Michael Porter in front of 1,500 Americans. It was a lot of fun because if you ask them questions, they go for it. And there was this discussion about adding value. And I said, Mr. Porter, because I very often start very polite, can I ask you a question? You write a lot about values, but have you ever read a book about values? And he got irritated. So my mission was accomplished. I said, what do you mean? These are the people who just lack feedback because nobody dares to challenge them. I said, now if you read a book about values, you know you cannot add them. I said, what do you mean? Now I was prepared. I said, let's take a car. What is the value of a car? Speed, yeah. Safety, good, could be. Can you add speed to a safe car? So you have a safe car. Can you add speed to that car? Easy, you double the engine size. Can I bet it will lose its safety? Can you add safety to a speedy car? Easy, you take off the wheels. It's very safe, but you might lose speed. The problem with values is you cannot add them. By the way, we have a lot of bad language metaphors. Adding value is stupid. Oh, let's add a bit customer orientation to our company's culture. You cannot add customer orientation. You have to redesign the organization. Like you have to redesign the car, asking the question, how can I use the speed of the car to make it more safe? And we're not, and that is my summary of the summary in the introduction, we are not educated to deal with dilemmas. And I think social media will kill itself if we don't reconcile it with dilemmas. Okay? And you will see there are loads of dilemmas in the use of social media, and companies who do that well are in great shape. Because the beauty of dilemma reconciliation is you don't have to throw away your old logic. You see that the history of management thinking was one extreme after another. And now we're in the middle of a next extreme that will kill itself if we don't reconcile it with the opposite. Right? So we had efficiency in the 1910 environment, scientific management, and it killed itself by exaggeration. Then the Hawthorne experiment was kind of a rite de passage, as the French would say, and we went into, no, it's all about human motivation. So you got Maslow and Herzberg and all these theories, and it killed itself by exaggeration. Then they said we have to go out of the company, and in the 60s it was client orientation, marketing theories, and it killed itself and it was replaced, you remember, by the shareholder value. You remember that one? It killed itself recently. And it was interesting. I wrote an article in the Financial Times, and I didn't like the article, but the title was pretty okay. And it was shareholder value, the value created for people who never share. And I was predicting it would kill itself. Shall I predict if it's early in the morning? So if you don't throw up, then I will tell you what I think is the next exaggeration, right? Don't throw up, okay? Have you heard of corporate social responsibility? Yeah, yeah. And everybody goes on it, yeah. CO2 reduction, so they don't only buy the most ugly car in the world, which is called the Prius, but they say, no, it has very little CO2 emissions. But I know it's a fashion, because if you include the recycling of the battery of this damn car, you can even not beat my car. And there was an article in Business Week that says if you, and they took my car as an example, 8 cylinders, 420 horsepower, 79 years full gas, the same CO2 emission as the recycling you need of the CO2 emission for the battery, yeah? And that's why it's all fashion. It will kill itself. The issue is that the value of an organization is how do you deal with the competing demands and needs of the stakeholders. I'm not against society, I'm not against shareholders, I'm not against clients, I'm not against employees, but you can only sustain if you reconcile the dilemmas. And I'll give you some examples of that, and I apply them to social media. Okay? Now, let me go to the approaches we take. We help people recognize cultural differences. That diversity that needs to be integrated needs an approach that helps you recognize. A lot of my colleagues in the field of cross-cultural studies, apart from using bipolar scales, they stop at this level. They say, yeah, these are typically the French. And then they walk out and say, good luck. So I would say add respect to it. Now, respect is easy once you know that all cultural differences are in yourself, but you have forgotten about them. Now, some people say, but how can you ever respect people from Asia? They always say yes, even in cases where they want to say no. A bit the opposite from Germans. Now, the trick is, can I put you in a situation where you would say yes while you wanted to say no? And then you get it, right? And those who are married, you know what I mean. Now, respect starts when saying, gee, and I remember 32 years ago, I remember because that memory still works. I was utterly in love. And this was in London. It's now my wife, we're still in love, but I travel more. And we were in London and she bought a dress. Now, you know, London, awful dress. And she said, Fons, do you like it? Now, if you're in love, what do you say? Yes. Or you become English, you say, interesting dress. And suddenly you realize that if you're in love as a Dutchman, you become Japanese, right? Now, interestingly enough, the dilemmas, and that's an important point, that we share worldwide are the same, but the approach to the dilemmas are opposite. So, Japanese and people in love start with the relationship, and then later at the bar with a bit of sake, they give feedback on the dress. In the Netherlands, if you're not in love, you start with the feedback, and if you're German, you give 5 reasons why it's ugly, and then you go to the bar to say how much you love her. The dilemmas are the same, but cultures are the approaches to dilemmas. And we call that reconciliation. Reconciliation is the art of integrating opposite, and then we realize a root. Now, let's apply this. First of all, thank you for your output. We had 70 from this community, and it's a bit of a disappointment, but Thijs told me many of you don't have a computer. So we understand. We had our own little community, and we got another 63 or so, or what is it, 53. So we got 123 participants, which is a nice little start. But we leave our website open, please, if you say we want to participate. And what I'll show you in feedback is about half. We have much more, but it's too short to go through all this. Let me give you some basic feedback. We see here personal use and business use in respectively blue and red. Heavy users, medium users, light users. Okay? Then we tapped into your dilemmas and we found a list where we asked you to rank order the importance. And these are the top 5. Okay? Have a look. I won't read it for you, but I want to say these are dilemmas. And I'm happy that you found them interesting, otherwise you wouldn't have chosen them. But these are the typical dilemmas of social media. And the risk, and that's what I'm saying, that you only go for one side. Now, the worst you can do for a dilemma is make a choice. You need a mindset that combines. Okay? Now, what is cultural about it is where you start. Do you start on the left-hand side or on the right-hand side? And this is another word for strategy. If we talk about strategy, it's the integration of dilemmas, business dilemmas. Okay? Now, let us, first of all, define culture, because culture is the way we approach dilemmas. I don't want to ask you, by the way, I'll get a bit interactive in a second. Culture is like an onion. On the outside we find the artifacts and products, like the way we dress, what we eat, the language we speak, but it covers a deeper layer, and that's called norms and values. Norms are shared orientations of what we define as what we should do, and values are what we like to do. And once we start liking what we should do, in other words, the value becomes a norm, it slips out of consciousness and becomes a basic assumption. Now, in a nutshell, these things are different across communities, because this is very implicit, because we are faced with different problems that come to us as dilemmas. And in fact, culture is the way we solve dilemmas. Okay? As I told you earlier. Where do you start? Do you integrate? There's no society that can't do with feedback, and there's no society that can't do without relationships. But feedback in some cultures are at the cost of relationships, and vice versa. So we need to combine them in our own way, and then you survive. And if it works, it becomes a basic assumption. So this is done in areas of human relationships, time, and nature. It's a way of structuring the basic dilemmas we human beings face. Let's take, and I'll become interactive. I did my research since '79. I did my PhD research at a little community called Wharton, which is a business school in America, and I was sponsored by Shell. And we compared 6,000 Shell people in 10 different refineries in how they acted differently within a corporate setting, that's called corporate culture, and we tried to explain that by national culture. And this was one of the questions we asked 6,000 people. By the way, we now have a database of about 100,000 people, and it's interesting. Let me, by the way, come and walk. There are chairs, the poor, much older guys. Come, there are chairs here too. Yeah, come here too, a lot of chairs. And if you're shy, just stay there, okay? Some chairs here too, if you like, if you say, gee, my spot out of them, yeah? Now, the question is the following. You're riding in a car, driven by a close friend of yours. Your friend is speeding, going 50 kilometers an hour where you're allowed to go 30, and your friend hits a pedestrian. You come to court, and the lawyer of your friend says, don't worry, you're the only witness. Now what I'm doing with you is, first of all, testing who would like to be in a situation like this. So, oh, nice situation. No? It's interesting, I do this kind of daily, kind of everywhere in the world, and I've never had a participant who said, nice situation to be in. Why? It's a dilemma. And it doesn't matter if you're male, female, young or old, Korean or American, this is a dilemma. Now what is the dilemma? It's a dilemma between friendship, and therefore, I might lie for a friend, versus the truth, or the respect for the law that protects our children to be crushed, right? Now companies have tried to solve this. You go international, and you see suddenly that people react differently on this. Now I will show you in a second. They say, yeah, but we need consistency in our joint. So they developed values. And the answer could be, my friend has a definite right to expect me to lie, some right, no right. Second question is, would you lie, yes or no? You know your friend was speeding, and then he hit a pedestrian. Okay? Now, most American companies have introduced this concept of integrity. Now, if companies have a value, you know they have a problem with it. That's why 82% of American companies have a value called integrity, right? Especially in the financial service. And we also, I have 3 daughters, so we have some values on top of our door. We change them every quarter. And the last one, very successful, was a value called we don't kill people here. Yeah, it's one of our values, but it makes our guests nervous. Yeah? Now tell me, if a company has integrity, why I should not get nervous? Because you only talk about values that are not yet norms. Okay? So I was with Merrill Lynch. Obviously they had the first and second value was integrity. And I said, okay, you have integrity as a value. How does integrity as a value help you to give the correct answer to the car accident dilemma? And there was an American who stood up and said, Mr. Trompenaars, I could follow you so far. I didn't like all your jokes. Bush was still at the helm. But can I ask you, how can integrity be different than my friend not asking me to lie and me not lie? And I was interrupted by a Korean who said, John, I disagree. How can integrity be different than me helping my friend? And the fun was that all 80, this was the top 80 of Merrill Lynch, all 80 people understood both. The dilemma is shared. It's our culture that kills half of us. Culture is a way of reducing complexity. Now, in America we had half a logic, and obviously the opposite half was in France. And then we have another half logic in Korea, and all these half logics were very interesting when the Americans were in America, the Koreans were in Korea, because in Korea you have friends, and in America you don't lie. But now we get multicultural teams, where you have a Korean working with an American, and I have good news for you, half logics don't work anymore. And by the way, this is for me the core of the crisis we're in. That we don't have paradigms that can deal with cultural dilemma. That's why 75% of mergers and acquisitions fail, and because the best bipolar thinkers, in other words, the ineffective dilemma reconcilers, are McKinsey. They screw up every integration process I've seen, and then we clean up the mess after 2 years. Obviously their fees are pretty low, so it's 6,000 per day, but then you get somebody of 24. And it's kind of interesting because they say, you know, we have the best strategy and we have the best HR people and we have the best logo, just 1 million, and we have the best IT system. It's only these damn people working here, right? Now, what is the alternative if we take the second one? We respect the culture of others. Now, that's why I chose Merrill Lynch. And the question is, how can the values of integrity and the respect for other cultures help you to give the correct answer to the car accident dilemma? Now, what have I done so far? I've said the world is growing more diverse. We don't have paradigms to deal with it effectively. MBAs and McKinsey as an extreme example. And I'm testing now, how good are you with this? So you have a Korean in your room, you have an American, a Dutch guy who obviously knows what you should do, etc. And except when you are against these values, if you say no respect for other cultures, you know, I live in Amsterdam, are you kidding? Or integrity, that's not my pot of tea, then tell me. But if you say these are interesting values, what do? If a Korean says integrity is helping friends and the American says you have to tell the truth. Take 1 minute with your neighbor. Normally I give 20 minutes, but we don't have a lot of time, and by the way, time doesn't really help. Good luck. And the answer is the bottom one. And I'm intrigued, because you're in social media, you're bright, try to find it on the web. Good luck. I'll be back in 1 minute, testing your transcultural competence. That will apply to social media because we're about halfway, or I don't know, but who cares? Yeah?
Vroeg dat aan mij. Ja, hij vroeg dat aan mij. Hij maakt wel de hashtag. Oh ja, nee, hij is working. Hij is working. De Focal Logic. Focal Logic. Je vroeg dat dan maar 8%. Ja, het is 2000 jaar.
Ik zou best, ik zou dat niet echt willen gooien.
Had ik niet gedaan.
Ja, nee, dat is ook niet. Maar ik zou gewoon liever een auto met 500 maanden voor de 50 kilometer per dag. Nee, ik ben niet goed tevreden. Weet je, ik wil even zeggen, dat soort dingen zijn allemaal bijna... Ik zeg, ik zit al weer een jaar. Ja, ik zit 1,5 jaar. Wat er gebeurd is de samenvatting
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I know it's not fair. What normally happens is that people share a bit what they would do. And obviously I didn't give you a lot of time, but the brilliant mind comes immediately with a solution, even without internet. Any idea? Any idea? What could you do where you say, wow, the Americans agree, And the Koreans agree in this little case. Now, you see what I'm doing with you. I'm giving you a dilemma where we lack the, let's say, routine of dealing with it effectively. And let's then apply that to social media. Now, the problem here, first of all, let me start, is not your lack of answers. The problem is my question. Yeah? This is called an MBA question. An MBA question leads to brilliant discussions, but the question is wrong. Huh? In a nutshell, MBA education giving brilliant answers to fundamentally the wrong questions. Now, and I blame the professors rather than the students, they don't know. Okay? What is wrong with my question? It has an assumption. My question has an assumption that by choosing for a friend and lie, or to go for the truth, is more or less integrity. You cannot find integrity on bipolar scales. Integrity, if you go to the etymological dictionary, one of the wonderful definitions is integrity is creating wholeness through the integration of opposites. So what the hell is that? Think about yin and yang. Yin and yang are two opposites that create a whole. Now in practice, what does it mean? I was doing work with Toshiba, all Japanese, I do this about 5 times a year, on innovation. And I give this example because innovation, you remember, is combining values that are not easily combinable, therefore scarce, therefore profitable. That's the essence of innovation. Okay? So I said, what do? Let's practice this. And cut a long story short, the Japanese always says, our option is not on the list. I said, tell me more. What we would do in Japan is we would test the strength of our friendship by asking our friend to tell the truth in court, so we can talk to the judge to lower the sentence for his courage. So now what happened? Instead of choosing between the friend and the truth, you connect your friend to the truth. And the end result works everywhere. Now the dilemma is, this is called universalism versus particularism, and a universal standard versus the particular case. A universalistic culture would go for this, in a nutshell, the Germans. And on the right hand side we have the Italians. Okay? How do you recognize the particularists? They will always ask a question before they answer. Things like, what happened to the pedestrian? Or the Italian asking what happened to the car. Yeah? There are important things. Yeah, and what car? Even more important. Yeah? The Germans, the more universalistic cultures, as you will see the Swiss win, is, yeah, there is a standard and we need to follow it. Now have a look. This is our 100,000 database. Now we have about 60 countries in there, so this is, let's say it's 80,000. In Switzerland, 97%, look at the second line, says, my friend has no right or some right and I will not help by lying. And as you know, 3% speak Italian. Italy is not on the chart because PowerPoint can't deal with negative scores. Now, do you understand why I allow myself to make jokes left and right? Because they're both half-truth. At the bottom is not worse than at the top. But the problem is, if you go international, you get dilemmas out of this. And the dilemma here is, are we going global with standards to create critical mass, or do we respect cultural diversity? This is Europe's problem. This is Amsterdam's problem. And we say, oh, we have to make a choice, because politicians, good politicians, make choices. And it's complete crap. What we need to do is crack the line, and that's what I'm trying to do with your mind, and exaggerate the positions. If you only go global and centralize everything, you get the famous ROW culture, right? Here is Chicago and the rest of the world is ROW. This is McKinsey Consulting. They have a 3-week workshop for young graduates, which is called How Can I Fake Listening to a Client? Yeah? Now the opposite is the multi-local corporation. The multi-local corporation is the corporation that says what we do in the Netherlands should be different from Germany or Japan. It's what was once KPMG Consulting. The only thing that really matters was the local budget. Those are half-lame ducks. The compromise, be careful for the compromise, is known as the Statue of Liberty with a local flag. What we need to do is to create a transcultural cooperation. This is also, you can apply this for Europe, you can apply this to social media. By the way, I think social media can play a fantastic role in this process. What is a transcultural cooperation? 4 characteristics. They learn locally, combine the best local practices into a next practice which they then globalize. The top is diverse, number 2. And they are driven by shared values that come like yin and yang. Applied Materials is, I think, a wonderful organization that has applied this to its backbone, because they have yin and yang values. Instead of saying we believe in teamwork, so that the Americans think differently than the Japanese about this, they say we strive for teams that consist of creative individuals. We give direct feedback with diplomacy. And we're running a workshop in the Netherlands to explain what that means, right? And then the fourth characteristic, it's polycentric. It doesn't have one center, okay? Now, let's apply this now in 4 elements of social media. The individual versus the group. You are part of communities and you're an individual. Now, culturally speaking, this is what we did in our research. If you have to choose between give people as much freedom as possible versus no, even at the cost of individual freedom, it's better to look after each other, is also a social media type of dilemma. And I'll come back to that because this is fairly abstract to make it more precise. Let's have a look who chose for A. A are individualists. How do you recognize individualists? They start with their first name, they mention the family name, and they go back to their first name. In Asia, you start with the family name, you say the first name, and you call yourself by the family name, right? Signs, or it's also interesting that the English are one of the few people in the world with the Americans that write I with a capital letter and you with a small y. You remember the Dutch once had I with a small I, ik, and you, u, with a capital U. And then the socialists came in and they said, no, you should be with a small u. And in fact, I with a big I, because we're socialists. Have you ever met a socialist that didn't start the sentence with I? Now, have a look. Enormous differences, right? Now, let's now apply this to social media. First of all, it's nice to have cultural differences. By the way, very important. Because can you evade cultural differences by internet? Yes and no. You know, the telephone has shown what it does to cultural differences. Namely, the more you relate with each other, the more it's clear that you're different. Okay? And it's interesting because it looks like the telephone is something that is not comparable to the internet. No, it's partly true. For that time it was, but it didn't decrease the cultural differences. The more we get similar, the more we want to be different. And I'll come back to that in more detail. But let's have a look of age. We have the same database, 100,000 people. We disregarded the passport and we said, what are the scores by age? And you see that individual people, that young people are much more individualistic than older people. Now, fine, who cares? Not one is better than the other, but you interact. In social media strategies, you interact. Have a look, for example, here in what light heavy users mean. And it's interesting, this is, by the way, only 123 people, so it's a kind of a nutshell thing. But our 70 from here, mostly Dutch, our database gave some more stuff outside of the Netherlands. That was one of the selection criteria in our invitation. But it's interesting to see that, although again it's a very small sample, but you can't just say that heavy users are only found with young people. Now if they're also found with older people, you get the clash of are you there for you as an individual, are you there for the community? You need to reconcile. Have a look. This is one of the dilemmas you chose, number 2 out of the 5. For example, individual knowledge and judgment is the most effective basis for making the best decisions. So you take something from the internet. Collective intelligence, so the power of the network, co-creation in communities. It's very interesting. If you go for one or the other, you're not as effective as a reconciliation. Now, how could you reconcile? Let's have a look. For example, are you independent or are you dependent? Independence, obviously, is the individual. Dependent is I'm part of a group. Is there a way to reconcile? Let's first start abstract and then apply it to what you have told us. Dependence, this is called expert input. I love this one because it's moving, and the more it moves, the bigger the lack of content. The opposite extreme is heat without light. The reconciliation, obviously, is known as interdependence, and that starts with dialogues where individuals can have an input to an interdependent role. Let's go to the next one. This is the version that we have said, individual knowledge as judgment for effective decision making. versus collective intelligence, right? How can you combine the two so that the end result is even better? This is cutting through the Gordian knot. You do that as an individual. This is groupthink, enormous problem with communities who think. You've seen the latest versions of democracy. It's awful. Populism, it's called. Groupthink. You have idiots with grey hair that say fantastically childish things, and people say, yeah, he's right. Moroccans, that's the problem. 9% of you said we have to reconcile this, and this is called the anti-clockwise helix. You start with the individual and connect it to the group, and that leads to pooled possibilities for personal choice. Can you not combine the individual invitation to make the group results better? Or can you start with the group? And that was interesting. You started, 91% of you said, of the 123, you start with the group, and then you try to find better personal choices. Okay? Now, the point here is, we need to find ways of combining the two. If I see people at the coffee break all next to each other on their little device, I said, is this reconciled or not? Now, it's only reconciled when you Twitter to your neighbor, right? I don't know. And we have to find ways in combining. Reward systems could help. If, for example, in an organization, we advise that very often, you give individual rewards for the best team players, and you give team rewards for those teams that can show what they do for the individual, you're in great shape. There's a whole book written about that, that's called Co-opetition. Read it. Co-opetition, very applicable to social media. This is my favorite, specific versus diffuse. And then let's apply this. Well, what is specific, what is diffuse? This was the work of Kurt Lewin. Kurt Lewin said, Americans are amazing people, and he was a German, going to America. And he said, Americans are amazing people, you hardly know them and they talk to you. It's because they are like peaches. They have a small nut and a big public space. Have you here? This is public versus private. So the refrigerator for Americans is public. You hardly know them, they're in your refrigerator. And for most Europeans, close to a rape. I lived 3 years in America. We didn't have a car, typically Dutch, you borrow one. Americans, you need my car? Here's my car. Have you tried this in Germany? No way. Yeah, he's my wife, but leave my car, okay? Yeah. Furniture, ask the French. Furniture is private. For the Americans, you move, you leave your furniture. Now, according to Lewin, this leads to a specific relationship. If I relate to you and you relate to me, cut the crap, what is this about? This leads to also what they call low context communication. And we wrote a book, the Dutch are very known for this, and the book was called You're an Idiot, but Don't Take It Personal. Yeah? Because you communicate directly, but don't take it personal. Even titles. In America, when you're a doctor in the university, and they're very formal. At the barbecue with the same people, you're Fons. In Germany, at least, you're a hair doctor in academia, and that's the coconut. You're a hair doctor at work. You're still a hair doctor at the butcher who buys, good Abend, hair doctor, a steak again. And you come home, good Abend, Frau doctor. Where are the little doctors? And you see the coconut, initially no relationship. But around October, this happens. It's diffuse, you share everything. Now the problem in multicultural management is this, is when the coconut meets the peach. What is public and what is private? Now apply this to social media. What is public and what is private? Emails, very simple example. Emails are low context, let me tell you. And you go to the Japanese, they don't hear your tone of voice, they don't see your face. So what is the resolution across cultures to deal with cultural differences of this nature? This is one of the most important ones. First of all, how did we measure it? We asked people, would you paint the house of your boss? Answer A, dear boss, go to hell. He's the boss in the company, not outside, that's why the assumption is specific. Versus, yeah, my boss, I need to help. Have a look. People who said, dear boss, go to hell. So you see, both in the Netherlands and Sweden, 9% are immigrants. And you're in China, it's my boss, I need to help. Now, very surprising score are the Japanese. The Japanese are expected at the bottom. So we again interviewed the Japanese who said, Mr. Trompenaars, our option was not there. So what is the problem? He says, in Japan we would never wait till the boss asks. Okay. Now you see on the right hand side, the typical communication pattern, social media, low context, you make the point and then you go to context. In diffuse cultures, Japan is the most extreme example, but most of Asia and we better get to used to that, is you start from the outside, gradually making the point. And you don't have to go that far. This is the problem in Shell between the English and the Dutch. The Dutch say, what an awful tie. The English say, what an interesting tie, it has potential. Yeah? And they mean the same. Now, in social media, you better know this. How do you reconcile this? Have a look. Best decisions are made when researching the issue. Best decisions made are real-time information. Real-time information is specific. Research is diffuse. Have a look. If we take this, chronic distraction versus weight of the evidence, yeah? And the reconciliation, 62% from best decisions are made when having real-time information, but we have to reconcile it with depth, okay? Modeling with a purpose. And so have a picture where you're going, which is the context within which you, versus the opposite, and that was 38%, with the same outcome, but you start differently. I love this one, you know, the cold learning. Do you go for active experimentation, which is real time, versus reflective observation? I come to a summary through this one, transparency versus opacity, openness. And this is obviously related to this dilemma. Have a look. If we take the extremes, official secrets for insiders only, versus public, the famous public secret. You see they're always cynical and negative because you don't want to be there. Social media needs to get sharing with those who might complete the picture. And vice versa, 77%. Now, the final one, I'd like to end with that. What gives people status? Is it based on what you do or who you are? And it's kind of interesting because ascribed status is who you are, family background, age, gender. Does it matter on social media? Yeah, in some cultures it does. Have a look. This is how we measure it. People who are achievement oriented would disagree with this. Have a look of the percentage of disagreement. Okay? Now, I love this concept, and that's the leadership you need to develop as a metaphor. Do we only go for performance? You get the Dutch disease. You challenge leaders so often that nothing happens. And they say social media is democratic. Yes? The opposite is follow the leader. There's no challenge. Okay, this is the Arab problem. This concept, can we, and I think social media can help tremendously in this, become servant leaders. Servant leaders only have one objective. How can I enable other people to perform better? And if you are a parent, you know what I mean. I come to some points that you will get in, and I thought this was too technical, but you will get in the download. But if you would like to take the final point in key takeaways, this is what I was trying to say. First of all, social media is loaded with dilemmas. Dilemmas of rule versus exception, individual versus group, specificity and diffuseness, and I'm giving examples outside of social media and apply them to social media, how to reconcile. Our current professionals are not educated to deal with them effectively. Define challenges in terms of dilemmas, I would say, and avoid compromise. Reach out to colleagues of different orientations. Make use of all types of communication. I love that in social media in a different way. I love LinkedIn, for example. I think Facebook is crap. I mean, for me, not for you. And be aware of your own default position. Are you the straight, forward Dutch person, or are you more the indirect person? And then finally, that the dilemmas are shared in the world, but we have different ways of approaching them. If you say, hey, I like some of the slides and I cannot download them from public domain, you will get other sources too. But can I ask a last point? If you want to download these questions, these data, there are many channels and they will be made available. But also our site. Why our site? It's not about our site. But please, for those who didn't fill in the questionnaire, the survey, come and do it. It would be a lot of fun. It only takes 3 hours. I don't know if we have time for questions, Thijs.
We have time, but first for a warm hand.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
We have time for one question before we move on. One question from the audience.
Thank you. Great stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm normally pretty clear.
Yeah. So, we'll save the questions for the social talk this afternoon because Fons will be back with us in the social talk International Strategy. Okay, so thank you very much, Fons. Next in this room, Favela Fabric, Sander Dullaert and Arno Rutte, and in the other rooms, the on the fifth floor, Christian Pereira of MicroStrategy. On the fifth floor, oh sorry, yeah, thanks. Right here, Kenneth Webkaart of TomTom. In the fifth floor, Marco de Mooi of Vodafone. Fifth floor, also Victor van der Wijk of KLM. And on the first floor, Lot Keizer of LinkedIn. All starting in a few minutes. Enjoy the next session. Ja.